Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. You guys really knocked it out of the park with this case. The 911 call you sent, those interviews with Stephanie Parr's parents. Wow, it is just chilling.
It's really something.
This is a real life mystery that played out right in front of the cameras, fueled by media attention, and this family just desperately looking for answers.
Yeah. And what's so striking to me is how right away they understood the power of media and
Okay.
how they could use that. They
Right.
turned their living room into a studio. They're giving constant interviews, and they really kept Stephanie's case front and center.
It
And
makes
this,
you think about how, public pressure can be a real double-edged sword in these situations.
we're definitely going to circle back to that later. The media part of this is just fascinating. But first, I want to talk about Stephanie. Her parents describe her as this little ball of energy, a real firecracker. She was obsessed with art, all kinds of art, but she was really into body art. And get this, she was even a grand marshal in a Disney World parade.
That's awesome.
It's important to remember, Stephanie is more than just a victim in a case file. She was a young woman with dreams and passions, and her life was tragically cut short.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where John Osligan enters the picture. He was an on again, off again boyfriend, someone Stephanie's parents never really liked. And at first, Stephanie seemed to keep him at arm's length, kind of in the friend zone.
Right.
But while Stephanie was recovering from double pneumonia,
Hmm.
Osligan really saw an opportunity. He swooped in, showered her with attention and affection, cooking for her, constantly checking in, acting like the perfect caretaker in the field. We call this love bombing, and it's a tactic abusers use to create this really intense emotional bond, and they do it quickly.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just like, just being a nice guy. It's almost like a deliberate manipulation.
Exactly. Think of it like overwhelming someone with this tidal wave of affection so they can barely come up for air, let alone really think critically about the situation. And it worked on Stephanie. She started falling for him,
Yeah.
but then came the warning signs.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What were some of the red flags?
Well, one of Stephanie's ex-boyfriends reached out to her father, Ed, concerned about a possible assault. And Ed, being a protective dad, confronted Stephanie about it.
Oh, I can't even imagine having that conversation with my daughter. That would be so hard.
It's a really tough spot for any parent. And Stephanie's reaction was sadly pretty common in cases like this. She downplayed the incident. She claimed that she fell and hit her head. Victims of abuse often do that, they minimize the violence.
Yeah.
They might even deny it completely because they're scared, ashamed, or maybe they even still love their abuser.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. But the abuse didn't stop there, right?
No. There was another incident where Stephanie called her mother crying and hiding in the woods, terrified of Osligan. The police got involved that time.
Okay, so the situation's clearly escalating. Did Stephanie press charges?
This is where it gets really tricky. Despite being clearly afraid, Stephanie hesitated to press charges or get a restraining order. She was caught in this cycle of violence, feeling trapped and unsure how to escape.
This is the part that I find so hard to wrap my head around. Why stay in a situation when it's so clearly dangerous?
You're right, it's incredibly complex. There's often a mix of emotional dependence, maybe fear of retaliation, or even a belief that they can change their abuser. It's really important to remember that leaving an abusive relationship, it's a process. It's not just a single decision.
Yeah, and tragically, Stephanie never got that chance on October 30th, 2019. She vanished.
Yeah, she's supposed to meet her sisters for a night out at a comedy club, then head home, but she never made it.
What happened next? What did the family find?
So her mother, Charlene, found Stephanie's car in the driveway, lights on, and the scene inside the house, it just didn't add up. Her phone was found under some blankets on the couch, even though she was supposed to be getting ready for work.
Hmm.
There was a text from her employer asking if she was okay, but no response.
It's those little details that are so unsettling. Like, why was her phone there? It's like almost like someone wanted it to be found.
Yeah, you're right. It's these little things, these seemingly insignificant details that often point to something being terribly wrong. And that's when the family decided to go public. They turned their living room into this makeshift media headquarters. And they really used the power of the public to try to find their daughter.
Wow. So they were proactive right from the start, almost like their own investigation team.
Exactly. They knew that keeping Stephanie's name and face in the public eye would be crucial to generating leads and putting pressure on the authorities, and the community response was incredible. A meal train for the family lasted 4 months. Volunteers conducted 88 searches, and the case quickly gained national attention.
Yeah, it's incredible how people can rally around each other in these times of crisis. But all this time, John Osselgen was still out there, right?
Yes, he remained a person of interest, but they didn't have enough to link him to Stephanie's disappearance directly at that point. But then there was a twist. Oslogen was arrested, but not for anything related to Stephanie.
Wait, what happened?
He was caught with child exploitation images on his phone. Now, while this was a separate issue from Stephanie's disappearance, it gave law enforcement a chance to dig deeper into Oslogen's life, his digital footprint, and potentially find evidence connecting him to Stephanie.
So sometimes these seemingly unrelated charges can actually crack open a bigger case.
Absolutely. It's like a chain reaction. One event triggers another, leading to unexpected breakthroughs. And in this case, it gave investigators the legal authority to access Oslogen's phone records, his location data, his online activity, a treasure trove of potential evidence.
It's amazing how technology plays such a crucial role in these investigations these days.
It's like having a digital trail that can reveal a suspect's movements, their communications, their state of mind.
So what did they find on Oslogen's phone? Did they find any connection to Stephanie?
Here's where the tension really ramps up. Investigators discovered a series of unanswered text messages from Oslogen to Stephanie on the night she disappeared, 10 messages in just 9 minutes.
Wow.
A pattern of escalating communication that suggests a growing sense of urgency, maybe even panic.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. What did those messages say? Did they reveal anything about where Stephanie might be or what happened to her?
That's what investigators were trying to piece together. But unfortunately, we may never know the full content of those messages just a few weeks after his arrest for the child exploitation images. John Oslogen took his own life.
Oh, wow. That's a huge development. Did he leave a note?
He did, and while the exact contents haven't been released to the public, authorities confirmed that Oslogen took responsibility for Stephanie's death in the note.
This is all so tragic, and it just leaves us with so many questions. Was the suicide driven by guilt, fear of prosecution, or was there something more going on that we'll never know about?
It's a question that often haunts these kinds of cases.
Wow.
We're left trying to understand the mind of someone who could commit such horrific acts and then ultimately take their own life. And it leaves the families of the victims grappling with an even more complex form of grief.
But even with Oslogen gone, Stephanie was still missing. The search continued, driven by the family's incredible determination to bring her home.
Their commitment to finding Stephanie, even in the face of such a devastating loss, is truly remarkable. It speaks to the depth of their love and their unwavering hope.
It's a testament to the human spirit, to the power of love and resilience, and their story doesn't end there. Months later, there was a discovery, a bittersweet moment that would bring a sense of closure, but also profound heartbreak to Stephanie's family.
2 teenagers just walking along Route 9 stumbled upon something that would finally bring Stephanie home, but not in the way anyone had hoped.
So these teenagers are walking along and they make this discovery. It's almost too much to process, the family searching for months, then the arrest, the suicide, and now this.
That's a lot to take in him that he found Stephanie's remains.
Oh, wow.
It was devastating for the family, but it also gave them some solace in a way they were able to bring her home and lay her to rest.
I can only imagine that mix of emotions they must felt,
Right.
relief, grief, anger, all at the same time. It's just a heavy burden to carry. Even though Oslogen had confessed in that suicide note, the investigation continued, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The authorities still needed to officially, confirm the cause of death, gather concrete evidence to close the case. The suicide note was a big piece of the puzzle, but it wasn't the whole picture.
Right. It makes you wonder about the why did Oslogen do this? What drove him to these extremes?
It's a question that experts in domestic violence are always trying to understand, the cycle of violence. It can escalate so rapidly. And with Stephanie, it went from this whirlwind romance to tragedy in a matter of months.
It's terrifying how quickly things can spiral out of control.
It really highlights the importance of recognizing those early warning signs. Even when things seem perfect on the surface, love bombing, for example, can be so deceptive. It's about creating that dependency, isolating the victim from their support system, making them feel like they owe their abuser something.
Right. So it's not just about the, grand gestures. It's about control and manipulation.
Exactly. And in Stephanie's case, Oslogen really exploited her vulnerability when she was sick. He positioned himself as her savior, the only one who could really care for her. This is a classic abuser tactic, preying on someone when they're at their weakest.
It's just chilling to think about that level of calculation involved.
And that's why education and awareness are so crucial. We need to empower people to recognize these red flags, to understand that abuse can take many forms and that they're not alone.
And speaking of empowerment, you mentioned the Stephanie Parr Foundation earlier. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. After Stephanie's death, her family channeled their grief into something truly amazing. They established this foundation a nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and the families of missing persons.
That's incredible. They took this horrific tragedy and turned it into a force for good.
Yeah, they're offering resources, education, and advocacy to help prevent future tragedies and really empower those affected by abuse. It's a testament to their strength and their commitment to ensuring that Stephanie's story makes a difference.
You know, it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can emerge.
Absolutely. And their work is already having a real impact in one of the articles you shared. Ed Parr talked about how several victims actually reached out to the foundation, saying that Stephanie's story gave them the courage to leave their own abusive situations.
Wow, that's powerful to think that sharing Stephanie's story could have that kind of ripple effect.
It shows how important it is to break the silence, to share these stories, and let victims know that they're not alone.
I remember that 911 call we started with, just the raw emotion in Charlene's voice. It's a chilling reminder of how urgent this issue is, the real terror that victims face every single day.
You're right, it brings the statistics to life, reminds us that behind every case file, there's a family dealing with unimaginable pain.
So what can we do? How can we as listeners contribute to ending this cycle of violence?
I think it starts with awareness, educating yourself about the signs of abuse, learning about the resources available in your community, and not being afraid to speak up if something doesn't feel right.
Sometimes just lending an ear, offering a safe space for someone to talk can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. It's about creating a climate where victims feel safe coming forward, knowing they'll be believed and supported.
And remember, seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out. There are people who care and want to help.
Stephanie's story is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence, but it's also a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the potential for positive change.
As we near the end of our deep dive into Stephanie's case, I keep thinking about the enduring power of storytelling.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how one person's story can spark these conversations, raise awareness, and ultimately lead to meaningful change.
In a way, Stephanie's legacy lives on through her family's dedication to helping others.
Absolutely. They've taken their heartbreak and turned it into a powerful force for good, ensuring that Stephanie's story continues to inspire hope and resilience.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Stephanie's case, I keep thinking about her parents, Ed and Charlene. Their strength through all of this is just incredible.
It really is. They were thrown into this unimaginable nightmare, and yet they never gave up.
Never. They turned their living room into this command center, working with the media, organizing searches, doing everything they could to keep Stephanie's story in the public eye.
Right. And they could have so easily just retreated into their grief, but instead they chose to fight. They became advocates not just for Stephanie, but for all victims of domestic violence.
And that's what I find so inspiring about the Stephanie Parr Foundation. It's like this living memorial to her, ensuring that her story has a positive impact. They're not just remembering her, they're actively working to prevent these tragedies from happening again.
That's right. It's about education, intervention, support. It's a multifaceted approach to this really complex issue.
It's a reminder that, we all have a responsibility to address domestic violence. It's not something that we can just leave to law enforcement or, social service agencies. We need to be active participants in creating a culture where abuse is just not tolerated.
Exactly.
So what does that look like? Practically speaking, what can we do in our everyday lives?
Well, I think it starts with awareness, educating yourself about the different forms of abuse. Those subtle signs, the insidious ways that it can just creep into a relationship.
Right.
Learn about the resources that are available in your community, the shelters, the hotlines, support groups, and most importantly, don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that seems off.
Yeah, sometimes just lending an ear, offering a safe space for someone to talk can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. It's about creating a climate where victims feel safe coming forward, knowing they'll be believed and supported.
And, it's important to remember that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. So if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out. There are people who care, and there are people who want to help.
Stephanie's story is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence. But it's also a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the potential for positive change.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Stephanie's case. We hope that it sparked a conversation, maybe raised some awareness, and inspired you to take action. Remember that even small acts of kindness and support can have a ripple effect and help create a safer world for everyone.